Yesterday, an FBI director was arraigned for lying. The day before that, the nation's top attorney, Pam Bondi, was accused of doing something even worse, standing before Congress and twisting the truth on live camera. It was supposed to be a routine oversight hearing. Instead, it turned into a clash between truth and power. And when Senator Sheldon Whitehouse took the mic, he didn't shout, he didn't grandstand, he calmly dismantled the Justice Department's credibility piece by piece. What he revealed about Bondi's false claims and Kash Patel's contradictions should shake anyone who still believes accountability exists at the highest levels of government.
Arraigned a former FBI director for allegedly making untruthful statements to this committee. The Attorney General of the United States sat right there and made untruthful statements to this committee. And they weren't maybe untruthful statements. This wasn't a question of nuance. She made allegations about the ranking member and me having received political contributions from some, she said, Epstein close confidant. Well, guess what? That's actually checkable. There's a thing called the Federal Election Commission. The Federal Election Commission keeps a website that tracks all of our contributions. An intern at the Department of Justice could have checked to see that the allegation, I'll leave it to myself, that I had received campaign contributions from this individual, that was false. And it's not a maybe answer. It's a yes or no. Did I or didn't I? And there's an unimpeachable record that shows that what she said sitting right there was not true. If we are going to care about untruthful statements made by the Department of Justice and the FBI in this committee, let's not have this be yet another area where there are different rules for one party than for the other party. And just by the way, on that very subject, the other thing that the Attorney General did sitting right there was to strip all cover away from the untruthful statements that had been made to this committee by the current FBI director. You all heard him here. He said that he couldn't tell us about his grand jury testimony in the Mar-a-Lago case, where he first pled the Fifth, then got immunity, and then testified. He couldn't tell us what he testified to, he said, because the Department of Justice had sealed the testimony and because there was a court order barring him from doing that. And he actually identified which judge, the chief judge of the D.C. Federal District Court. Well, guess what? We know that since then, the chief judge of the Federal District Court has said that that was not true. He said specifically nothing prevented Director Patel from discussing his grand jury testimony. And yesterday, the Attorney General had the chance to say, you're right. We did seal the testimony in that matter. The Department of Justice did seal the testimony, and Patel's statement was true. Not about the court order, but at least it was sealed by the Department of Justice. She didn't say that. So now both his testimony that the DOJ had sealed his testimony and his testimony there was a court order barring his testimony are kind of demonstrably false statements to this committee. And then when he came back and we challenged him on those false statements, his second false statement was to say, I'm not going to answer any of those questions because my transcript of the grand jury testimony, I've worked with the DOJ to see that it is publicly released. Well, it either has been publicly released or it hasn't. It's a very simple distinction, yes or no. And we all know that it has not, in fact, been publicly released. And when we asked about that from the Attorney General, again, she left him high and dry and refused to say that anything had been publicly released, that there was any publicly released transcript. So yesterday stands in really stark contrast. I should say the day before yesterday stands in really stark contrast to yesterday. Yesterday, an FBI director was arraigned for making a false statement. The day before that, the Attorney General of the United States made arguably even falser statements. We'll see how the other case turns out. And she left the current FBI director completely exposed on his multiple false statements that his grand jury testimony in the Mar-a-Lago case had been sealed by the department, was under court order not to be released, and had since been publicly released as a transcript. I don't know if this committee is going to take itself seriously enough to treat false statements to this committee as serious matters, irrespective of who made them. But the contrast is really stark. Thank you, Chairman.
The story begins with chaos. Within 48 hours, two of the most powerful law enforcement figures in America found themselves under scrutiny. One faced arraignment for false statements, the other accused of misleading the very committee meant to keep her honest. The irony was staggering, and what followed was a moment that cut through all the political noise, a rare instance when logic and truth fought their way to the surface. Senator Whitehouse opened not with anger but with precision. He started by addressing the so-called Arctic frost controversy, a report released by the committee chair just days earlier. That document claimed the FBI had been weaponized, turning investigative tools into political weapons aimed at senators. It was dramatic, headline-grabbing, and exactly the kind of narrative that fuels outrage online. But Whitehouse wasn't interested in drama. He wanted facts. He explained what few in the room seemed to understand. The records being cited weren't secret surveillance or wiretaps. They were toll records, the digital equivalent of an old-school pen register, a tool investigators have used for decades. It doesn't record conversations, it simply logs who called whom and for how long. When prosecutors have proper legal grounds to track a number, every phone that number contacts shows up automatically. It's not political, it's procedural. And just like that, with a few calm sentences, Whitehouse diffused an entire narrative built on paranoia. The moment was powerful not because he exposed corruption but because he reminded everyone how investigations actually work. He painted the image clearly. If a wiretap tracks a mob boss calling a baker, the baker's number appears in the data. That doesn't make the baker a criminal. It just means he answered the phone. The same logic applies to senators whose numbers showed up in FBI records. It's not persecution, it's proximity. But in today's world of instant outrage, that nuance gets lost. Whitehouse's explanation wasn't just a defense of process, it was a defense of reason. He urged his colleagues to stop jumping to conclusions before seeing the evidence, because that's how truth gets buried, under piles of partisan suspicion. His message was simple: before you cry weaponization, make sure you understand the weapon you're talking about. Then the senator turned to something deeper, something far more explosive. He pointed to the irony playing out inside the very institution demanding accountability from others. Just one day earlier, a former FBI director had been charged for making false statements. Yet here sat Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, accused of doing the exact same thing before this committee. And unlike that director, her claims could be fact-checked instantly. Whitehouse reminded the chamber what Bondi had said the day before, that he and another senator had accepted campaign contributions from a well-known figure described as an associate of Epstein. It was a shocking accusation until you looked it up. Because, as Whitehouse noted, the Federal Election Commission's website makes every donation public. Anyone, even an intern at the Department of Justice, could check those records. And the results were undeniable. No such contribution existed. The statement was false. Completely verifiably false. This wasn't a matter of interpretation. It was yes or no. Did the money come in, or didn't it? The record said it didn't. Yet Pam Bondi had said it did. Whitehouse used that single example to make a much larger point. If we care about truth, it can't only apply when it's politically convenient. If lying to Congress is a crime for one official, it must be a crime for all. The senator's tone stayed calm, but his words hit like a hammer. He said the committee couldn't continue with two sets of rules, one for the powerful, another for their critics. His quiet insistence on fairness made the hypocrisy impossible to ignore. The same Justice Department that prosecuted others for misleading statements had now misled Congress and shrugged it off. And as if that wasn't enough, Whitehouse peeled back another layer of contradiction, this time aimed at FBI Director Kash Patel. During previous hearings, Patel claimed he couldn't discuss his grand jury testimony in the Mar-a-Lago investigation. His excuse, that the Department of Justice had sealed his testimony and that a court order prohibited its release. He even named the judge who supposedly issued the order, but as Whitehouse revealed, that story didn't hold up. The chief judge of the D.C. District Court later made it clear that no such order existed. Nothing prevented Patel from discussing his testimony, which meant both of his claims, the sealing and the supposed court order, were false. Two false statements delivered under oath before Congress. Pam Bondi had a chance to clarify those inconsistencies when questioned later. She could have confirmed that the testimony had been sealed or at least acknowledged some procedural confusion. Instead, she said nothing, leaving Kash Patel fully exposed. That silence spoke volumes. It suggested the department itself knew his statements didn't match reality, and yet no correction, no apology, no accountability followed. Whitehouse laid it all out methodically. The pattern was unmistakable. Officials at the top of the system expected everyone else to face consequences for falsehoods but not themselves. The hearing meant to uphold justice had turned into a mirror reflecting institutional hypocrisy, but he wasn't finished. After exposing the lies, Whitehouse stepped back to reveal what this moment truly represented, a test of credibility for the entire justice system. Because if lawmakers themselves can be misled in plain sight, what does that say about truth in America's most powerful institutions? His point wasn't to humiliate anyone, it was to restore perspective. He reminded everyone that investigations exist to find truth, not to serve politics. That it's possible for the FBI to act lawfully without being part of a conspiracy. And that accusing investigators of bias every time you dislike the outcome only erodes the system that keeps the country from descending into chaos. That's what made his statement resonate. In a political world addicted to noise, Whitehouse used reason like a weapon. He took the audience by the hand and walked them through concepts that sound complex but are really about integrity. He wasn't defending an agency, he was defending the principle that facts should outlive rhetoric. The beauty of his argument was that it appealed to both sides without pandering to either. He acknowledged legitimate skepticism but separated it from baseless hysteria. He drew a clear line between oversight and obstruction, between questioning authority and weaponizing distrust. That distinction is the heartbeat of democracy, and it's disappearing fast. While others traded soundbites, he delivered substance. He turned legal jargon, like toll records and predication, into plain language lessons on how justice is supposed to function. He reminded viewers that law enforcement doesn't operate on emotion, it operates on evidence. And when that system is attacked for political theater, it's not the FBI that suffers, it's public trust. In an era where shouting dominates and facts take a back seat, that kind of clarity feels almost revolutionary. Whitehouse didn't need to raise his voice. He weaponized calm. Every pause, every measured sentence made the contrast sharper. On one side chaos and accusation, on the other quiet precision. Then came the turning point, the part that drew an audible hush in the room. He compared the 2 days directly. One day, Kash Patel is charged with lying to Congress. The next, Pam Bondi lies to Congress and walks away untouched. He called it what it was, a double standard. A justice system willing to punish some lies but not others depending on who tells them. He ended his remarks with a challenge not just to the committee but to the country. He asked whether the Senate would take itself seriously enough to treat false statements as serious matters, no matter who made them. Would truth still matter when it was inconvenient? Would accountability still apply when power was on the line? The silence that followed said everything. When Whitehouse finally stepped back, the tension in the room didn't fade. It lingered. Because everyone knew he had touched something raw. Beneath all the partisanship, the hearings, the finger-pointing, lies one unspoken fear that the truth no longer carries consequences. And that fear is what makes his words echo long after the microphones cut off. Outside the chamber, clips of the exchange spread across social media. Some called it a master class in integrity. Others dismissed it as political theater. But for those who watched closely, it was something different. It was a reminder that accountability isn't supposed to depend on party or power, it's supposed to depend on evidence. And perhaps the most powerful part of Whitehouse's message wasn't what he accused others of doing, it's what he didn't do. He never turned the hearing into a personal attack, he never descended into shouting or spectacle. He let the facts speak, and they were louder than any speech. That restraint gave his words weight. It's what separates leadership from performance. In a system drowning in outrage, calm truth is the ultimate disruption. What makes this moment unforgettable is how it reframes the entire debate about justice and bias. Whitehouse's defense of process wasn't an excuse, it was a warning. He reminded everyone that democracy doesn't survive on blind trust, it survives on informed oversight. And when oversight turns into sensationalism, real accountability dies. Think about what that means beyond politics. Every time a leader spreads falsehoods without consequence, it trains the public to stop believing in anything. It pushes people toward cynicism, the belief that everyone lies, that facts don't exist, that truth itself is a political choice. That's how democracies decay, not through coups or chaos, but through the quiet death of credibility. In that sense, his speech wasn't just about Bondi or Patel, it was about protecting the idea that facts can still win, that the truth can still cut through spin if someone is brave enough to say it plainly. And that's exactly what happened here. While the headlines obsessed over partisan drama, something rare unfolded in that room, a lesson in how to fight disinformation with discipline. No yelling, no theatrics, just truth, backed by evidence, delivered with precision. It's easy to overlook moments like this because they don't fit the usual media formula. Outrage gets clicks, nuance doesn't. But what keeps a democracy alive isn't the noise, it's the people willing to speak sense into it. So when Senator Whitehouse calmly corrected the record, dismantled falsehoods, and exposed the double standards surrounding Pam Bondi and Kash Patel, he did more than win a political exchange. He reminded the nation that integrity still matters. Maybe that's why this clip resonated so deeply online. Viewers weren't reacting to partisan victory, they were responding to honesty. In a time when so many public figures weaponize misinformation, hearing someone use facts as a shield felt revolutionary. And that's exactly why this story matters, because it's not about one senator or one hearing, it's about what happens when truth finally stands its ground. Moments like these prove that accountability isn't gone, it's just hiding behind all the noise, waiting for someone brave enough to drag it back into the light. If you've ever wondered whether honesty can still compete with outrage, this hearing answered that question. It can, but only if we keep watching, keep questioning, and keep demanding the same standard for everyone, no matter how powerful they are. Because at the end of the day, justice only works if truth still means something. And if you believe it does, if you think voices that stand up for facts should be louder than those who distort them, then make sure you hit that subscribe button, like this video, and share it with someone who still believes in accountability. Let's keep truth trending, one story at a time.